everyone. Well, welcome now finally to your first lesson here in Mass Comm, Intro to Mass Media. Going to do a little bit about Chapter 1. As you're reading over Chapter 1, now one of the things that's interesting is they talk about all the different networks, media conglomerates. Okay, it's really interesting because, for the longest time, when you had a media company, whether it was a television station or a newspaper, it was just owned by itself. So, for example, the CBS television network, it was by itself. It might have had the radio network that started off with, and then it came the CBS television network also. But it was pretty much by itself. Now, of course, CBS, along with Paramount Pictures and other places, are all part of a media conglomerate called Viacom. Okay? Same thing with ABC. Okay? The American Broadcasting Company started off as a radio network. Oh, there we go. Started off as a radio network. And then, of course, nowadays, when you think of ABC, you, of course, think of its parent, not only its sister company, ESPN, but its parent company, of course, as part of the media conglomerate of the Disney Corporation. I think some of you have heard of the Disney Corporation. All right. What I want to talk about today, in particular, is about the rise of a television network. Oh, by the way, as you can tell, this is my office. Well, it's a great office, isn't it? And this office just happens to have this huge marker board. And I'm actually going to move you over just a little bit. Just like that. All right. And I love that it's got this huge marker board, so as I'm teaching online, which I can't stand teaching this class online, I wish we were face-to-face, but if I'm going to teach this class online, at least I have this huge marker board in my own office. So, of all the history in Chapter 1 that they talk about with media companies and that kind of thing, no story is better than the one I'm going to tell you about today. Now, as you know, television is probably as crazy as it's ever been since the invention of television, okay? But when you talk about when television first began, okay, you had 3 television networks. They, of course, were CBS, ABC, and, of course, the first one, which was the National Broadcasting Company, or NBC, all right? Now, with these 3, they would provide programming, and then things called affiliate. We're going to talk more about networks in another chapter, but they would have affiliates in different cities all across the country that would pick up their programming, and they would show it usually between 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. That's called prime time. All right, 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. And that's where you got your television. Now, here in the New York City market, we got very lucky. All right, we were the lucky one. We had 6 channels, because not only did we have Channel 2, Channel 7, and Channel 4 for these networks, these were like the flagship stations of the networks, but we also had what we call 3 independent stations. These were stations that were not related to a network, but were still over-the-air television. And that, of course, was Channel 5, which used to be called WNEW, Channel 9, which used to be WOR, and Channel 11, which is WPIX. And then in the late 60s, we got Channel 13, which is PBS. So basically 6 over-the-air plus PBS, we had 7 stations. We had the most of anybody in America for decades. Most markets could only afford, because owning a television station is very, very, very expensive. That's a lot of electricity putting out on that very high frequency or VHF. And a lot of you don't even know what I'm talking about when it comes to, putting a signal out. Because a lot of you, of course, have always had cable, or even, when you think about it, a lot of you have grown up with streaming through the internet. But if you look at some of the houses in your neighborhood, if you look at the roofs of those houses, especially the much older houses, you may still see that TV antenna on top of the roof. That big aluminum silver thing that's up there, that's how people used to receive television. All right? That's how you used to get TV. And of course, that kind of electricity, your electric bill, if you had a television station, even in the 1950s, your electric bill is more than what your parents pay for your house in 5 years. That's like for a week. And that was in the 1950s. That's how much electricity it takes to put these signals over the air. So you had these. Am I too shiny here? I can't turn off the. No, I can't turn it off. Okay. I don't want to get too shiny. I see there's kind of a glare there. Can I block out the glare? No, I can't block out the glare. So anyway, maybe I'll just stick to writing closer down to the bottom. Well, anyway, so for the longest time, this is how many television stations you got. All right. Now, the big three networks, and that's what they used to be called, the big three, were, of course, CBS, ABC, and NBC. Those were the three main networks. They were in just about every market in America. And people would watch network television, especially at night. Well, a fourth guy came around in 1950, not long after television debuted. Didn't last very long, petered out. It was just too expensive. So you had the big three for the longest time. Okay, and as we'll talk about when we talk about the history of television during that chapter, when you talk about some of the great historic shows of all time, they all appeared on any one of those big three networks. Well, finally in 1986, a new network came out. Okay, and that was the Fox network. Now, what the Fox network was going to do, they're going to use Channel 5 here in New York as their flagship station, but they were going to have to try and break into these other markets, because remember, many markets could only afford to have 3 television stations. It was just too expensive to have them. And, well, if Fox wants to be a network and the other 3 are already being covered in a city in, say, like Milwaukee, Wisconsin, or El Paso, Texas, or Laramie, Wyoming, or something like that. If those 3 TV stations are already with a network, Fox, there's no room for you. And as they would start to build their schedule, and what they did is every year they would add another night. So they began with Sunday night. Did that for you? Oh, actually, I'm sorry. They began with late night, a late night talk show. And then the next year they started with Sunday night programming. This was it. This is a network only programming 1 night a week. And then 2 nights a week. They added Saturday. That's where, if some of you know the history of TV, that's where the show Cops and America's Most Wanted came. Back in 1988 on the Fox network on Saturday nights. And then they started programming Monday night. So they were doing Sunday, then Saturday, and then Monday. And then they eventually would start programming 5 days a week. But by 1993... they were still far and away the number 4 network. Cable TV is now starting to make a little dent, but there's one particular program in it, even today, as a lot of you are probably still confused about what a network is and anything like that, ABC, NBC, CBS, the TV landscape has totally changed since then. But by the early 90s, 1993, Fox was still the number 4 network. Well, there's a particular type of programming that is still very popular. It's still the most popular type of programming for television in America today, as it was back in 1993. And that, of course, is the National Football League. Professional football is still the most popular program on television today. It's not dramas, it's not sitcoms, it's not movies. It is definitely professional football. That's why tonight they're hyping up that Thursday night game. As you can see, when we talk about prime time, remember, prime time is between 8 and 11 p.m. Monday through Saturday, 7 to 11 p.m. on Sunday. That's when the most amount of people are sitting down watching television. And, prime time, it's not just on Sunday afternoon anymore. That's the way it was for many years. They, of course, use a lot of these prime time weeknights. As Thursday night tonight, we see the premiere. We've got the Super Bowl champion Buccaneers against the Cowboys. And they expect a good audience, probably about 18, 20, 22 million people watching. Which, when you see network ratings today, when even a lot of network shows, even some of the ones that you recognize, okay, ones like This Is Us, okay, or Chicago Fire, they're just not getting the ratings that they used to. They don't get the a 10 million or a 12 million. They might get 4 or 5 million people tops watching them. But at least NFL is still very popular. Well, back in 1993, it was more popular than ever. And here's what happened, okay? Here's today's story. By 1993, okay? By 1993, for many years, CBS had what was called the National Football Conference. That's who their contract was with. Right? Now, the National Football Conference is where a lot of teams like, for example, the Giants and other teams play. Those are pretty much the old NFL before the merger in 1970. Now, NBC used to have the American Football Conference teams, remnants of the old American Football League, who then, when they merged in 1970 with the NFL, the AFL and the NFL, of course, they became conferences, the AFC and the NFC. And then ABC would have Monday Night Football. That's just the way it always was. That's the way it's always going to be. Oh, ABC also, through ESPN, would have the Sunday Night Football game. So this was the contracts were renewed every 4 years, and this is who they went with for decades. I mean, CBS had the NFL since the 1950s. Since 1962, NBC had the AFL/AFC teams. All right, and since 1970, with the creation of Monday Night Football, that's what ABC had always had. So by 1993, after the season's over, going into 1994, contract negotiations are coming back up. Everybody thinks, oh, we're just going to renew like we always do. So CBS renews, NBC renews, ABC renews. They're about to sign the contracts, and then all of a sudden a phone call comes to the NFL commissioner, Paul Tagliabue. Rupert Murdoch, who owned the media conglomerate News Corp, which included the Fox TV network, said, Commissioner Tagliabue, how much did CBS bid for the NFC games? And he says, well, it's a 4-year contract, and overall we're going to receive about $600 million from them. Why? Have you signed the contract yet? No, we haven't signed it yet. Why do you ask, Rupert? He says, I'll do it for 4 years at Fox, and I'll give you $1.2 billion. Whoa! Whoa! Well, this just blew away the entire media landscape, because now Fox was going to take the NFC games, all right? And they're going to take it away from CBS. Now, CBS scrambled. They were selling stock, they were trying to borrow as much money as they could, and they came up with about $900 million, but they couldn't match Fox's offer. So now Fox was going to get the quote-unquote NFC games. Now, this was a very shrewd business move by this media giant, because again, not only was the National Football League the most popular television programming then, it still is today as we're finishing up the year 2021. Even with this whole media landscape spread out the way it is, with streaming services, Hulu and Netflix and Prime, Amazon Prime, with some of the other HBO and Showtime and all of these different services, all the different cable channels, okay? Still the most popular program, number one, far and away, is National Football League games. Now, why would Murdoch spend they always say in business, if you want to make money, you got to spend money. Well, why would he spend so much to acquire from CBS the NFC package? Well, here's the reason why. Because now, what Rupert Murdoch was going to have, I'm going to erase some of this stuff. Here, let me erase this stuff here. Now Rupert Murdoch was pretty much going to have the television landscape, because let's think about it. Let's think about all the top largest television markets in America, okay? What's the number one largest television market? Well, that of course is the New York City market. That's where we live. Well, who plays in New York City? The New York Giants. What's the number two market? Well, that's of course Los Angeles. And who at the time was playing Los Angeles? The Los Angeles Rams. Now, of course, you've got two teams in Los Angeles. Makes it even better now. What's the number 3 market in America? Well, that's Chicago. That, of course, means the Chicago Bears. What's the number 4 market? Well, that's the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And we all know who plays in Dallas. That's right, the Cowboys. What's the number 5 market? That's Philadelphia. Who plays there, of course? The Eagles. What's the number 6 market? San Francisco. And we all know, at least if you don't know, the 49ers. So, with locking up the NFC package, what Murdoch did is he locked up 13 of the top 15 markets in America. 13 of the top 15 had NFC teams. So what that meant was, is what he would do with these games is he would use them to promote his programming. I mean, there were times when I'd be watching a Giants game, and let's say it's Giants, 1st and 10 on the 20-yard line. Ball handed off to Rodney Hampton. Rodney Hampton off the right side scores 3. 3 yards, 2nd down and 7. And as Hampton would be running back to the huddle, he'd be being chased by Bart Simpson. And then, of course, they would announce that, don't forget, after the game tonight, the Simpsons, right here on the Fox Network. And they would just do that constantly. And, of course, why not? You had the audience. But my favorite part of this was, remember, as I said before, a lot of markets only had 3 TV stations. So the best part about this story was watching television stations flip. Okay? Now, you know, if you're a network affiliate, you sign a contract with that network, but at any time you can do whatever you want. And immediately, within days of Rupert Murdoch going ahead and acquiring the NFC package from the NFL, market stations all over the country, in different markets around the country, all dropped. My favorite one happened right in the town I was living in at the time. I was living in Terre Haute, Indiana, because I was going to graduate school at Indiana State University. And the ABC affiliate in Terre Haute, within days, dropped ABC and became a Fox affiliate. And the reason why was because Terre Haute is only a 3-hour. The Indianapolis Colts were not very big at the time, so they weren't a real. They had just moved to Indiana only like 6 or 7 years before that, so they hadn't really grabbed the solid base. But if you were a football fan in Terre Haute your entire life and you're 50 years old, well, you've spent 50 years being a Chicago Bears fan. So of course, with Chicago only being 3 hours away, that Terre Haute ABC affiliate quickly became a Fox affiliate, as would happen in a lot of other markets. All of a sudden, Fox went from covering about 55% of the country to 85 to 90% of the country, because so many television stations across the country flipped to becoming a Fox affiliate to make sure that they grabbed the NFC package. Well, do you think Murdoch made some money on this? Think about what he's done with that money. He took that money, strengthened the Fox network, created the Fox News Channel, which is still far and away the most watched cable station in America. It has got more viewers than all the other news stations combined. Okay? And of course, he strengthened his Fox network in a way that you probably would not have seen one of the most successful TV programs in American history without this deal, because it wasn't long after this deal, about 7 years later, that Fox debuted a new show called American Idol. And American Idol would be the #1 rated television show for the next 7 years. Okay? So let's just say, sometimes if you want to make money, you got to spend money. And that's what Rupert Murdoch did when he acquired his NFL rights. All right, I'm going to save you from a quiz this week, but get to your textbooks, read over Chapter 2, and I'll have a video coming for you next week sometime. Maybe Tuesday, maybe Monday. Who knows?